For 18 years I destroyed Christian marriages, and the weapon I used, it was the same one every single time, and it worked 91% of the time. I kept records, I kept count. 300 marriages, gone. Not because those couples didn't love each other, not because they didn't pray, but because they had no idea what was really happening to them. My name's Mitch. I grew up in a small farming community, maybe 5,000 people. The kind of town where everybody went to the same church on Sunday, but nobody talked about what happened behind closed doors. My mom and dad were married for 14 years before it all fell apart, and I watched every second of it. The arguments that started over nothing, the silence that lasted for days, the slamming doors and the crying at night when she thought we were asleep. My father was a long-haul trucker, gone 3 weeks at a time, home for 4 days. And every time he came back, it was like a stranger walking through the door. My mother raised 3 kids basically alone, and year by year, I watched the light go out of her eyes. She prayed. Lord, she prayed. Every single night, on her knees beside that old couch in the living room, asking God to save her marriage, asking God to bring her husband home, asking God to make the fighting stop. It didn't stop. By the time I was 13, my father packed a bag and drove away in his rig and didn't come back. And my mother, she turned her back on the church. She said she prayed for 12 years and God didn't do a thing. She said if God was real, he didn't care about families like ours. I was 14 when a man named Carl, who worked at the local feed store, started paying attention to me, buying me lunch, asking me about school, listening to me when nobody else would. He was the first grown man to treat me like I mattered, and about 2 months in, Carl told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Mitch, the reason your family fell apart isn't because your daddy was a bad man. It's because your mama was fighting the wrong war. She was praying to something that couldn't help her, but there's real power out there, and I can show you." I was angry enough to listen. Within 6 months, I was recruited into the organization, and they gave me a specialty, marriage destruction, because the higher-ups said I had a natural gift for it, that I understood marriage pain from the inside, that I could feel where couples were weakest, because I grew up watching a marriage bleed to death. And they were right. I was good at it, better than I ever should have been. The training was intensive. For the first 2 years, I didn't place a single assignment myself. I shadowed senior operatives. I watched how they studied couples. I learned to read body language, to notice when a wife flinched at her husband's words, when a husband's jaw tightened when his wife talked about her day. I learned that marriages don't break in big moments. They break in the spaces between words, in the sighs, in the silences, in the glances that last half a second too long or not long enough. By the time I was 16, I was placing my own assignments under supervision. By 18, I was working solo. And by 20, I was training others. The organization valued me because I had something most operatives didn't, personal experience. I wasn't just running a protocol, I was weaponizing my own pain. And pain, when it's weaponized, is devastating. Over those 18 years, I placed marriage assignments on at least 450 Christian couples that I can count, probably more. And the success rate? 91%. That means out of every 10 marriages I targeted, 9 of them were either destroyed completely or damaged so badly that the couple was barely surviving. I tracked them. I followed up. I reported numbers to my leadership every quarter. But here's what keeps me up at night, even 14 years after I gave my life to Christ. Those 300 marriages I destroyed, those were real people, real families. Kids who grew up exactly the way I did, watching their parents fall apart and not understanding why. I created more broken homes than the town I grew up in ever could. And the worst part? Most of those Christian couples never knew. They thought it was just them. They thought they married the wrong person. They thought maybe God didn't care about their relationship. They thought love just dies sometimes. They were wrong. Today I'm going to tell you exactly how we destroyed Christian marriages. I'm going to expose the one weapon we used every single time, and the specific ways we deployed it. And more importantly, I'm going to show you how to make your marriage absolutely impossible for the enemy to destroy. Because there's a difference between a marriage that's just surviving and a marriage that's been fortified. And that difference, that's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. And look, I need you to hear me on this. I'm not telling you these things to impress you with how evil I was. I'm telling you because you need to know. You deserve to know. Every Christian couple sitting in church right now, holding hands during worship, thinking everything is fine, they deserve to know what's being sent against them. And if I can save even one marriage by telling my story, then maybe, just maybe, it starts to balance the scale of what I destroyed. I'm going to be straight with you. The weapon we used to destroy marriages wasn't some complicated ritual. It wasn't some exotic assignment that took weeks to set up. The one weapon we used every single time was offense, unresolved offense. That's it. That was the weapon. Now I know what you're thinking. Offense? That's the big secret? That's the weapon that took down 300 marriages? Yes, and let me tell you why. See, most Christians think spiritual warfare against their marriage looks dramatic. They think it's going to be some obvious attack, a sudden affair, a major betrayal, a crisis that hits out of nowhere. And yeah, sometimes it is. But that's not how we operated most of the time. That's the amateur approach. Any low-level operative can create a crisis, but a crisis can be overcome. A crisis brings people together sometimes. I've seen couples survive terrible things and come out stronger. What they can't survive, and tell me what almost nobody survives, is the slow poison of accumulated offense. And that's what we specialized in. We didn't blow up marriages. We poisoned them. Slowly, drip by drip, offense by offense. Until the couple couldn't even remember why they fell in love in the first place. Here's how it works. And I need you to pay attention because this is the mechanism that took down 300 marriages on my watch alone. We called it the drip protocol, and it had 4 stages. Each stage builds on the last, and by the time you reach stage 4, the marriage is usually beyond repair, unless you know exactly what's happening and how to fight it. Stage 1. The seed. Every marriage has friction. Every couple disagrees. That's normal. That's not an assignment, but what we did, what we were trained to do, is watch for the moments of friction and plant a seed of offense inside them. I'll give you an example. A man I'll call Robert, good Christian man. Married to his wife Sarah for 8 years, 2 kids, they were solid, they prayed together, they went to church every Sunday. They looked unbreakable from the outside. But I had been watching them for about 3 months. That's what we do first. We watch, we study, we look for the cracks. And I noticed something. Every time Robert made a decision about money without telling Sarah first, she got quiet. Not angry. Quiet. She'd shut down for about an hour and then act like nothing happened. But I could see it. That silence wasn't peace. That silence was offense being stored. So I placed a seed assignment on that exact friction point. And what a seed assignment does is this. It amplifies the emotional response to the offense. It takes something that would normally be a 2 out of 10 irritation and pushes it to a 5, then a 6, then an 8. Over time, Sarah went from getting quiet for an hour to getting quiet for a day, then 2 days, then a whole week of cold silence. And Robert? He had no idea what was happening. He just knew his wife was pulling away. And the more she pulled away, the more confused he got. And the more confused he got, the more he made decisions alone, because he couldn't get her to talk to him. Do you see the cycle? That's the seed. The seed creates a loop. Offense leads to withdrawal. Withdrawal leads to isolation. Isolation leads to more offense, and it just keeps spinning. Within 4 months, Robert and Sarah were barely speaking. They sat on opposite ends of the couch. They stopped praying together. They slept in the same bed, but they might as well have been in different houses. And I didn't do anything dramatic. I just planted a seed in the friction that was already there. Let me tell you about another couple because I want you to understand how common this is. A woman I'll call Karen, married to her husband Mike for 9 years. Karen's friction point was different from Sarah's. Karen felt like Mike never validated her feelings. Every time she tried to express an emotion, frustration, sadness, worry, Mike would immediately try to fix it. He'd offer solutions instead of sympathy. And Karen didn't want solutions. She wanted to be heard. Now, Mike wasn't being malicious, he was a fixer. That's how he showed love, by solving problems. But Karen's heart didn't need a mechanic. It needed a witness. I placed a seed assignment on that exact dynamic. And what happened was textbook. Every time Mike offered a fix instead of an ear, the seed amplified Karen's feeling of being dismissed. What started as mild frustration became deep resentment. Karen started thinking, he doesn't even try to understand me. Then it became, he doesn't care how I feel. Then it became, I'm alone in this marriage. And the thing that makes the seed so deadly is that the offended person starts looking for evidence that confirms the offense. Once Karen believed Mike didn't care about her feelings, she started noticing every tiny moment that confirmed it. He checked his watch while she was talking. He sighed before responding. He said okay when she wanted him to say, I understand. Every little thing became proof. That's what I called confirmation harvesting. The seed doesn't just create offense, it creates a filter. And once the filter is on, the offended person only sees evidence that supports the lie. They become blind to the love that's right in front of them. Mike could have done 50 loving things in a week, but Karen would only remember the one time he didn't listen. Within 3 months, Karen had collected so much evidence that she was convinced Mike didn't care. And Mike, who loved his wife deeply, could feel her pulling away but couldn't understand why. He started trying harder, doing more, fixing more. And every fix made it worse because Karen didn't want fixes. She wanted presence. The seed turned their love language into a weapon. That's how precise this work was. Now, before I get to the next one, I need to tell you about something. That is why I want to tell you about something called destroying assignments, the 14-day Deliverance protocol. It is a complete system that teaches believers how to identify and destroy the most common demonic assignments. This protocol covers every type of assignment we used: financial attacks, marriage attacks, health attacks, and destiny attacks. This protocol was developed by believers who understand spiritual warfare. And I myself went through this protocol after my deliverance. It was part of my healing process, learning how to recognize and break every assignment that I had helped to place on people. The link is in the description. Do not wait. The enemy does not wait. All right, let me tell you about stage 2. Stage 2, the root. Once the seed is planted and the cycle of offense starts spinning, the next thing we did was help it take root. And the way we rooted offense into a marriage was through memory corruption. Now that sounds technical, but it's simple. Here's what it means. When you're offended at your spouse, really offended, not just irritated, your memory of the offense starts to shift. You start remembering it worse than it actually was. The words they said get harsher in your memory. The look on their face gets colder. The intent behind their actions gets more selfish. And over time, you're not even upset about what actually happened anymore. You're upset about the version your mind created. That's not an accident. That's us. We placed root assignments that specifically targeted how the offended spouse remembered the incident. We didn't change what happened. We changed how they remembered it. And once the memory is corrupted, the offense takes root. It becomes part of their identity. It goes from he hurt my feelings to he doesn't care about me. From she said something hurtful to she doesn't respect me. You hear the shift? That's the root. The offense moves from an event to an identity. And once it's an identity, you can't just apologize your way out of it, because it's not about the one thing anymore. It's about everything. I'll tell you about a couple I'll call David and Michelle. They had been married 12 years, strong couple, prayer warriors, both of them. But Michelle had a wound from early in their marriage. David had forgotten their first anniversary. Just flat out forgot. Now David apologized. He made it up to her. He took her out the following weekend. By any normal standard, it was resolved, but I placed a root assignment on that memory. And over the next 2 years, that memory shifted in Michelle's mind. It went from he forgot our anniversary to he never prioritized me. Then it became he's just like my father who never showed up. Then it became I don't think he ever really loved me. 12 years of faithful marriage. And one forgotten anniversary, amplified and corrupted over time, became the lens she saw everything through. Every time David was late coming home from work, she filtered it through that corrupted memory. Every time he forgot to pick up something from the store, it confirmed her belief. Every time he was tired and didn't want to talk, it proved the lie. David had no idea. He thought they dealt with the anniversary thing years ago. He couldn't understand why Michelle kept bringing up old wounds and connecting them to things that had nothing to do with each other. And here's what makes the root so dangerous in Christian marriages specifically. Because Christians are taught to forgive, a lot of believers think they've dealt with the offense when they say, "I forgive you." They pray about it. They ask God to help them let it go, and they genuinely try. But the root doesn't care about intention. The root lives in the memory, not the will. You can choose to forgive with your will while your memory is still corrupted. And over time, the corrupted memory undermines the forgiveness. The believer ends up in a cycle of forgiving and re-feeling the offense, forgiving and remembering, forgiving and resenting. And they feel guilty because they think they're failing at forgiveness. But they're not failing. They're fighting a root assignment that nobody told them existed. That's the root, and it's devastating. Now, if this is hitting home for you, if you've been dealing with old wounds that keep surfacing in your marriage, no matter how many times you think you've dealt with them, I want you to participate in something powerful right now. In the comments, write out this declaration. I release every stored offense from my marriage in Jesus' name. And I mean write it out. Don't just think it. When you participate in public declaration, when you put it in writing, something shifts in the spirit realm. I've seen it happen when believers participate together. So participate now. Take 10 seconds. Write it out. All right. Stage 3. The wall. This is where marriages start dying. And I'm not exaggerating. Once the offense is seeded and the root has taken hold, the next assignment we placed was what we called the wall. And the wall is exactly what it sounds like. It's an invisible barrier between husband and wife that makes genuine communication almost impossible. I'm not talking about not talking. Plenty of couples who have the wall still talk every day. They talk about the kids, the bills, the schedule, the grocery list. They function, they coordinate. From the outside, they look fine, but they can't connect. They can't be vulnerable. Every time one of them starts to open up, starts to share something real, something deep, something honest, they hit the wall, and they pull back. They change the subject. They make a joke. They pick up their phone. They say, "I'm fine," when they're dying inside. The wall assignment works by creating a spiritual barrier around emotional vulnerability. It makes openness feel dangerous. It makes honesty feel risky. It makes vulnerability feel like weakness. And for couples who grew up in homes where vulnerability was punished, where showing emotion got you criticized or ignored, the wall feels natural. It feels like self-protection. They don't even realize it's an assignment. I placed wall assignments on at least 200 couples, and the success rate on the wall alone was over 95%. Because here's the thing about the wall, most couples don't fight it. They accept it. They think that's just what marriage becomes after a while. They think the passion fades. They think intimacy is just for newlyweds. They think growing apart is natural. It's not natural. It's an assignment. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The wall is the stage where I saw the most damage. Because once the wall is up, everything else accelerates. Communication dies. Intimacy dies. Prayer together, gone. Date nights, gone. That feeling of being a team, gone. You become two separate people occupying the same space. And here's what makes the wall so insidious. Both people build it. One person starts, usually the one who got hurt first, and puts up a few bricks. Then the other person feels the distance and responds by putting up their own bricks. And before long, you've got two people building a wall between them, each one thinking the other person started it, each one thinking they're just protecting themselves. I would watch this happen in real time. And every time a couple added another brick, every time they chose silence over honesty, distance over vulnerability, protection over connection, I could feel the assignment strengthening. The wall feeds on avoidance. Every conversation you don't have makes it taller. Every emotion you stuff down adds another layer. Let me tell you about a couple I'll call Eric and Tammy, married 15 years, 4 kids, active in their church. Eric was a deacon. Tammy ran the women's ministry. They looked like the perfect Christian couple. But behind closed doors, they hadn't had a real conversation in 3 years. 3 years. They talked every single day, but they said nothing. They were roommates with a marriage license. They shared a bed, but they lived in different worlds. I placed the wall on them after watching their pattern for about 6 weeks. Tammy had tried to talk to Eric about feeling lonely in the marriage. She tried twice. The first time, Eric said she was overreacting. The second time, he changed the subject and turned on the television. Both times, Tammy felt rejected. And that rejection, combined with the seed of offense and the root of corrupted memory, made her stop trying. And once she stopped trying, the wall went up, and it went up fast. Within 6 months, Tammy was emotionally invested in her women's ministry group instead of her marriage, not because she was a bad wife, because she found connection where she could get it. And Eric? He threw himself into work and church duties. Not because he didn't love Tammy, because he didn't know how to reach her anymore. The wall did that, and they had no idea. Now, if this is hitting home for you, if you and your spouse talk every day but somehow feel further apart than ever, I want you to participate right now. In the comments, write out this declaration. Every wall between me and my spouse is coming down in Jesus' name. Write it out. Don't scroll past this. When you participate together with other believers, something breaks in the spirit realm. Take 10 seconds, do it right now, stage 4. The replacement. This is the final stage, and this is where marriages die. Once the wall is up, once the couple has stopped truly connecting, stage 4 is introducing a replacement. And let me be clear about what I mean by replacement. I don't always mean another person. Sometimes it is another person. Sometimes the assignment leads to an affair, but most of the time, the replacement is something subtler. The replacement can be work. A husband who pours every ounce of his energy and passion into his career because his career responds to his effort. His career gives him results. His career makes him feel competent and valued. His marriage makes him feel like a failure. The replacement can be ministry. And this one breaks my heart because I've seen it so many times. A wife who gives everything to the church, every prayer, every hour, every bit of emotional energy, because the church makes her feel needed. The church gives her purpose. The church fills the hole that her marriage used to fill. And she tells herself she's serving God. But what she's really doing is replacing the intimacy she lost at home with the community she found at church. The replacement can be children. A mother who makes her kids the center of her universe, not because she's a great mom, although she might be, but because her kids love her unconditionally. Her kids don't criticize her. Her kids don't build walls. Her kids need her in a way her husband doesn't seem to anymore. The replacement can be a phone, social media, a show on the streaming service, a game, anything that fills the void and numbs the pain of a marriage that's dying. And here's the trick. None of these replacements are evil in themselves. Work is good, ministry is good, loving your children is good. But when any of these things becomes a substitute for the marriage covenant, when it fills the space that was meant for your spouse, it becomes a weapon. I placed replacement assignments on couples who already had the wall up. And the replacement is the easiest assignment I ever placed, because by stage 4, the couple is so starved for connection that they'll grab onto anything that makes them feel alive again. I barely had to do anything. I just pointed them toward the replacement and let human nature do the rest. And here's what breaks my heart about stage 4. The replacement always feels good at first. It feels like relief. It feels like oxygen when you've been drowning. The husband who throws himself into work isn't trying to abandon his wife. He's trying to feel competent again. The wife who pours everything into the church isn't trying to replace her husband. She's trying to feel valued again. The parent who makes everything about the kids isn't neglecting the marriage on purpose. They're trying to have at least one relationship that works. That's why the replacement is so dangerous. It doesn't look like sin. It doesn't look like rebellion. It looks like coping. And the church, God forgive me for saying this, but it's true, the church often celebrates the very behaviors that are killing marriages. The husband working 80 hours a week is called a good provider. The wife volunteering at every ministry event is called a servant of God. Nobody questions it. Nobody sees the marriage dying behind the applause. I used that. I used the church's blind spots against believing couples, and it worked almost every time. There was a man I'll call Greg, good man, loved Jesus, married to a woman named Linda for 11 years. But by the time I got involved with their marriage, the wall had been up for about 2 years. Greg and Linda were functioning but disconnected, and Greg had started working late. Not because his boss demanded it, because going home felt empty. His office felt productive. At home, he felt invisible. At work, he felt important. I placed a replacement assignment that simply amplified that feeling, made work feel even more rewarding, made home feel even more draining. And within 8 months, Greg was working 60, 70 hours a week. He missed his daughter's school play. He missed his son's birthday party. And every time Linda confronted him about it, he said, "I'm doing this for us. I'm providing." But he wasn't providing. He was hiding. And the marriage, the covenant that God put together, was being replaced by a career that would never love Greg back. That's stage 4. And by the time you get here, most couples are already done. They just haven't signed the papers yet. Now let me tell you something that's going to change how you understand all of this. The weapon, offense, is not just one attack. It's a system. Seed, root, wall, replacement. 4 stages. And most Christians are somewhere in this system right now, and they have no idea. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it to wake you up. Because here's what I learned after I gave my life to Christ. Everything I did, every assignment I placed, every marriage I poisoned, it can be reversed. Every single stage can be broken, but you have to know what you're fighting. You can't defeat an enemy you can't identify. So let me tell you exactly how to destroy each stage, because the same God who saved my soul gave me the knowledge to undo everything I did. Breaking stage 1. Destroying the seed. The seed of offense is planted in moments of friction, and the way you destroy it is by refusing to let friction go unaddressed. I'm not talking about having a big confrontation every time your spouse annoys you. I'm talking about being honest in the small moments. Here's what I mean. When your spouse does something that hurts you, even a little, don't go quiet. Don't store it. Don't tell yourself it's not a big deal. Say it. Right then. Not in anger, not in accusation. Just truth. "Hey, when you did that, it bothered me. Can we talk about it?" That sounds so simple, but you have no idea how powerful that is. I watched assignments fail because of couples who refused to be quiet about their pain. I remember one couple I'll call Tom and Rachel. I placed a seed assignment on them. Their friction point was that Rachel felt Tom didn't help enough with the kids when he got home from work. Classic friction. I'd seen this one work 100 times, but Rachel did something I didn't expect. The very first time she felt the offense building, the very first time Tom sat down on the couch after work while she was drowning in bedtime routines, she walked over, sat next to him, and said, "Babe, I need you, right now. I'm overwhelmed and I need you to take the kids for 30 minutes. She didn't accuse him. She didn't go silent. She didn't store it. She addressed it immediately with honesty and vulnerability, and the seed couldn't take. I tried 3 more times over the next 2 months. Same result. Rachel refused to let offense sit in her heart. She brought it into the light immediately, every single time. That couple was untouchable. I eventually had to move on. The assignment was terminated because it kept failing. So the key to breaking stage 1 is immediate honesty. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. That's not just a nice verse. That's a defensive weapon. When you address offense immediately, the seed has no soil to grow in. And I want to be specific about this because it matters. Immediate honesty doesn't mean immediate confrontation. There's a difference. Confrontation says, "You hurt me and you need to know about it." Honesty says, "Something happened between us and I want to talk about it before it grows." You hear the difference? One is an attack. The other is an invitation. And the invitation is what kills the seed. Here's a practical thing you can do tonight. If there's something sitting between you and your spouse right now, something small, something you've been telling yourself doesn't matter, bring it up before you go to bed. Not in anger, not in accusation. Just say, "Hey, I want to clear the air about something before we sleep." That one sentence could save your marriage from a seed that's been waiting to take root. And let me tell you this. The couples who did this consistently were my worst assignments. The organization had a term for couples who addressed friction immediately. We called them no-soil targets. Because no matter how many seeds we planted, there was nowhere for them to grow. The couple dealt with everything so quickly that offense never had a chance to accumulate. I lost more assignments to no-soil couples than any other type. They were the assignment killer, breaking stage 2, pulling out the root. If the seed has already taken root, if old offenses have already corrupted your memory, the way you break it is through deliberate remembrance. Here's what I mean. Sit down with your spouse and talk about the offense. The real offense, not the version that's been growing in your mind for years. The actual thing that happened. And here's the key. Ask your spouse to tell you their side, their memory of what happened. I know that's hard, I know it's painful, but when you hear their version and their honest account of what they were thinking and feeling, it cracks the corrupted memory. It puts truth where the lie has been growing. There was a woman I'll call Diane. I had rooted an offense in her marriage that went back 7 years. Her husband Kevin had made a comment about her cooking at a family dinner, just a joke. But in Diane's memory, it had grown into a pattern of disrespect. She believed Kevin thought she was incompetent. She believed he looked down on her. And that belief colored everything. When they finally sat down and talked about it, during a counseling session their pastor arranged, Kevin was shocked. He didn't even remember making the joke. He had to think for a full minute before he recalled it. And when he heard how it had grown in Diane's mind over 7 years, he wept. He said, "Baby, I think you're the most incredible woman I've ever known. That joke was stupid. I didn't mean anything by it." And when Diane heard the truth, when she heard his actual memory set against her corrupted one, something broke. I felt the root snap. 7 years of corrupted memory started to dissolve. Not all at once. But the crack was there. And once the crack is there, the root can be pulled. Now, if you're realizing right now that there are old offenses rooted in your marriage, things that happened years ago that still color how you see your spouse, I want you to participate right now. In the comments, write out this declaration. I choose truth over corrupted memory in my marriage today. Write it out. When believers participate in truth together, roots break. Take 10 seconds. Write it now. Breaking stage 3. Tearing down the wall. This is the hardest one. Because the wall feels safe. The wall feels like self-protection. Tearing it down feels like risk. It feels like setting yourself up to get hurt again. But here's what I need you to understand. The wall isn't protecting you. The wall is imprisoning you. You built it to keep pain out, but all it's doing is keeping love out too. And the enemy knows that. That's why the wall assignment had a 95% success rate. Because most people refuse to tear it down. Here's how you tear it down. You go first. Somebody has to be brave enough to go first. Somebody has to say, I know things have been distant between us. I know we've been going through the motions. And I want you to know I'm still here. I still choose you. And I want to fight for us. That's it. That's how the wall starts to come down. One act of intentional vulnerability. I remember a couple I'll call Steve and Jennifer. The wall had been up for almost 4 years between them. They were 2 strangers living in the same house. And Jennifer, who is one of the bravest women I've ever heard about, she sat Steve down one evening after the kids were in bed and said, I miss you. I know we're both right here, but I miss you, and I don't want to live like this anymore. Steve didn't respond right away. He sat there for about 2 minutes in silence, and Jennifer told me later that those 2 minutes were the longest of her life. She thought she had made a mistake. She thought he was going to shut her down. But then Steve looked at her and said, I miss you too. I just didn't know how to say it. And the wall cracked. Not because of some dramatic event, because one person was brave enough to be vulnerable first. Now, I need to tell you, the wall doesn't come down in one conversation. It comes down brick by brick, conversation by conversation, vulnerability by vulnerability. It took time to build, and it takes time to tear down. But every honest conversation removes another brick. Every moment of genuine vulnerability creates a crack that the enemy cannot repair. And here's something I learned from watching couples who successfully tore down the wall. It wasn't always the big conversations that did it. Sometimes it was the small things, a hand on the shoulder when you walk past, sitting together instead of in separate rooms, making eye contact when you talk instead of looking at a screen, saying how are you really doing, and actually waiting for the answer. These small acts of presence are like taking a chisel to the wall. They don't seem like much individually, but over days and weeks and months, they add up. And eventually, the wall that took years to build comes crumbling down because 2 people decided to keep showing up for each other, even when it felt awkward and scary and uncertain. I'll tell you something else. Physical touch, not sexual, just touch, was one of the most powerful wall breakers I ever witnessed. I watched a husband who hadn't touched his wife in months reach over and hold her hand during a sermon, just held her hand. And she wept. Because that simple act of physical presence spoke louder than any words. It said, "I'm still here, I still choose you." The enemy hates touch between married couples. I mean, hates it. Because touch reconnects what the assignment disconnected. It bypasses the logical barriers and speaks directly to the heart. When a husband holds his wife or a wife puts her hand on her husband's arm, something spiritual happens. The wall cannot withstand consistent, intentional, loving touch. Breaking stage 4, removing the replacement. This one requires the most courage because removing the replacement means feeling the void again. It means turning off the numbing agent and facing the pain of a marriage that needs healing. If work has become your replacement, you have to come home. I don't mean quit your job, I mean come home emotionally. Choose to be present. Choose to invest in your family the way you invest in your career. If ministry has become your replacement, you have to step back, not forever, but enough to pour into your marriage the same energy you pour into the church. God does not want your ministry if it costs you your covenant. If your children have become your replacement, you have to re-establish your marriage as the foundation. Your kids need parents who are in love, not parents who use them as emotional substitutes. If your phone or entertainment has become your replacement, put it down. Look your spouse in the eye, have a conversation that goes deeper than logistics. And I'm going to give you a practical strategy for this. When you identify your replacement, whatever it is, don't try to eliminate it cold turkey. That usually doesn't work because the void is still there. Instead, replace the replacement with your marriage. For every hour you spent at work beyond what's necessary, spend an hour with your spouse. For every evening you spent on your phone, put the phone in another room and sit with your wife or husband. Not watching television together. Sitting together. Talking. Being present. This is hard work. I'm not going to pretend it's easy, but it's the only way to break stage 4. You have to feel the discomfort of the void long enough for your marriage to fill it again, and it will fill it if you let it. Because God designed marriage to be the deepest human connection on earth. It wants to be full. It wants to be vibrant. It wants to be alive. But it can only do that if you stop feeding the replacements. Here's another thing that helped couples break stage 4. They created what I call sacred time. A specific block of time, even just 30 minutes a day, where nothing else exists except the two of them. No phones, no kids, no work talk. Just two people looking at each other and being honest. Couples who established sacred time consistently were able to starve out the replacement within weeks. Because the marriage started providing what the replacement was only imitating. I'll tell you about a moment that changed my understanding of all of this. There was a man I'll call Paul. I had taken his marriage through all 4 stages. Paul was deep in stage 4. His replacement was his phone. He'd spend 3-4 hours a night scrolling after dinner, while his wife Amy sat in the other room alone. They hadn't had a real conversation in months. But one Sunday, Paul's pastor preached about the covenant of marriage. And something hit Paul right in the chest. He went home that afternoon, walked into the kitchen where Amy was doing dishes, and he put his phone on the counter, face down, and he said, "What can I do?" Amy looked at him like he was a stranger. She didn't trust it at first. She said, "Do about what?" And Paul said, "About us. What can I do about us? Because I know something's broken, and I want to fix it." Amy started crying, not because she was sad, because she had been waiting to hear those words for 2 years. 2 years of silence and scrolling in separate rooms, and all it took was a man putting his phone down and asking one question. And I want to pause here because I need you to understand what happened in the spiritual realm when Paul put that phone down. He didn't just set down a device, he set down his replacement. He looked the void in the face and said, "I'm not going to fill you with a screen anymore, I'm going to fill you with my marriage." And when he did that, when he chose his covenant over his comfort, the assignment shattered. I felt it break. It was like a chain snapping. That was the beginning of the end of my assignment on their marriage. It took them another 8 months of hard work, honest conversations, and prayer. But they made it. They rebuilt. And the assignment was destroyed. Paul told me something later, years later after I was saved and we crossed paths again. He said that moment in the kitchen was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Not because putting down the phone was hard, but because facing Amy's pain was hard. Because he knew he had caused it, and facing that truth required more courage than anything he'd ever done. That's what breaking stage 4 requires. Courage. Raw, ugly, uncomfortable courage. Now I need to tell you the most important thing I learned in 18 years of destroying marriages. The one thing that made a marriage invincible. The one thing I could never defeat. It wasn't prayer alone, although prayer is essential. It wasn't church attendance, although community matters. It wasn't even love, because I've seen couples who loved each other deeply still fall apart under the weight of a well-placed assignment. The one thing I could never defeat was agreement. When a husband and wife stood in genuine agreement, not just saying the same words, but truly united in spirit, truly aligned in purpose, truly committed to the same fight, every assignment I placed bounced off them like arrows off a shield. The Bible says, "If two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven." That's not poetry. That's a military strategy. Agreement between a husband and wife creates a spiritual fortress that the enemy cannot penetrate. I'm not talking about never disagreeing. I'm talking about fundamental agreement on the big things. Agreement that your marriage is a covenant, not a contract. Agreement that the enemy is real and you're going to fight him together. Agreement that you will be honest with each other, even when it's painful. Agreement that you will forgive quickly and store nothing. Here's what agreement looked like practically for the couples I couldn't break. They prayed together, not just over dinner, real prayer. They'd get on their knees together and pray for their marriage specifically. They'd pray against attacks. They'd pray for unity. They'd pray for their children. And when they prayed in agreement, when both of their voices were lifted to heaven asking for the same thing, I could feel the spiritual atmosphere shift. It was like a force field went up around their home. They also spoke life over each other. I noticed this pattern over and over. Couples in agreement said things like, "I believe in you and I'm proud of you and I'm grateful for you." And they meant it. They didn't just say it, they declared it. Over their marriage, over their spouse, over their future. And those declarations were like weapons against every assignment I placed, and they fought the enemy together instead of fighting each other. When conflict came, because conflict always comes, instead of turning on each other, they turned toward each other and said, "This is an attack. This isn't us. Let's pray." That response alone destroyed more assignments than anything else I witnessed, because when a couple recognizes the attack and refuses to turn on each other, the assignment has nowhere to go. It bounces off them. Every single time. Couples who lived in agreement were untouchable. I tried everything, every stage, every weapon, and it all failed. Because agreement closes every door that offense opens. Agreement heals every memory that corruption twists. Agreement tears down every wall before it can go up. Agreement makes replacements unnecessary because the marriage itself is full. I remember one couple in particular. I'll call them James and Maria. They were assigned to me specifically because they were leaders in their church and the higher-ups wanted them taken out. I watched them for 4 months. I studied every interaction. I looked for friction, for cracks, for anything I could exploit. And I found nothing. Not because they were perfect. They had disagreements, they had moments of tension, but every single time friction arose, they came together. They talked about it that same day. They prayed about it together. They said, "We're on the same team." I heard Maria say to James once, and I'll never forget this, she said, "It's you and me against the problem, never you and me against each other." I tried for 7 months. The seed wouldn't plant. The root wouldn't take. The wall couldn't form. I finally went to my leadership and said, "This couple can't be touched. They're in agreement." And my higher-up, a man who had been in the organization for over 30 years, he just nodded and said, "Move on. You can't break agreement. Nobody can." That shook me. That moment planted something in me that I didn't recognize until years later. Because if the enemy himself admits he can't break agreement, if the man who trained me to destroy marriages tells me that a united couple is untouchable, then maybe there's something real about what those Christians had. Something I'd never experienced, and that's what started my journey out. I'm going to tell you about how I got saved because I need you to understand something. The same God who watched me destroy 300 marriages is the same God who forgave me and pulled me out of the darkness. And if he can do that for someone like me, he can absolutely restore whatever the enemy has stolen from you. My conversion didn't happen overnight. It was a process. And it started with that couple, James and Maria. Their agreement haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. For months after I moved on to other assignments, I kept going back to what I saw in their marriage. The peace, the unity, the way they looked at each other like they were the only two people in the room. I wanted that. I didn't admit it to myself for a long time, but I wanted what they had. Then something happened that I didn't plan for. A woman I'll call Beth walked into my life. Not romantically. She was the mother of a kid I was coaching in a local baseball league. Yes, I coached kids baseball while simultaneously placing marriage destruction assignments on Christian families. The darkness lets you live two lives. That's part of how it works. Beth was a single mom. Her husband had left 2 years earlier, and one afternoon after practice, she said something to me that hit me like a freight train. She said, "You know, my marriage fell apart and I don't even know why. We just stopped talking, we stopped being honest. And by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late." She described the exact 4 stages: seed, root, wall, replacement. She described my work without knowing it, and as she talked I felt something I hadn't felt in 18 years. Shame, not guilt. I'd suppressed guilt years ago. Shame. Deep, bone-level shame. Because this woman's broken family could have been one of mine. Her ex-husband walking out, her kids confused and hurting, her sitting alone at baseball practice trying to hold it together. That was the fruit of what I did. That was the real cost of my 91% success rate. That night I went home and I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing faces. Robert and Sarah, David and Michelle, Eric and Tammy, Greg and Linda, all the couples I'd destroyed, and their kids. Their kids who grew up the same way I did, in broken homes, confused and angry, and reaching for anything that would take the pain away. I had become the very thing that broke me. That realization cracked something open inside me that I couldn't close. And over the next 3 months, I started pulling away from the organization. I stopped accepting new assignments. I made excuses. I said I was burned out. The higher-ups noticed. They always notice. One of the leadership came to my house, a man I'll call Victor. He'd been in the organization for 26 years. Victor sat at my kitchen table and looked at me with those cold eyes and said, "You're losing focus, Mitch. Is there a problem?" I told him I was tired, that I needed a break. Victor didn't buy it. He said, "There's no breaks in the work. You know that. Either you're in or you're out, and you don't want to find out what out looks like." That was a threat, and a year earlier, it would have kept me in line. But something was different now. I kept seeing Beth's face. I kept hearing her voice describing her broken marriage. I kept seeing the faces of all the children who grew up like I did because of what I did to their parents. I told Victor I needed a week. He gave me 3 days. During those 3 days, I did something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I drove past the little church on the highway, the one I'd driven past 1,000 times without stopping, and this time, I turned into the parking lot. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes before I went in. Then one Sunday, and I don't know why I did this, I walked into that small church on the edge of town. Just walked in, sat in the back row, didn't talk to anybody. The pastor was preaching about restoration. He read from the book of Joel, "I will restore to you the years the locust has eaten." And something in me broke, not cracked, broke wide open. Because those locusts, I was the locusts. I was the thing that devoured. And the idea that God could restore what I had eaten, that he could take the destruction I caused and rebuild something beautiful, I couldn't hold it together. I sat in that back row, and I wept. Full, ugly, heaving sobs. 18 years of destruction pouring out of me. A man I didn't know sat down beside me and put his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say a word. He just sat there while I fell apart. After the service, that man, his name was Bill, took me to get coffee. And I told him everything, all of it, the organization, the assignments, the marriages, the 300 families, every rotten thing I'd ever done. And Bill looked at me and said, "Brother, do you know what the blood of Jesus does? It doesn't just forgive the small stuff. It covers everything, every assignment, every marriage, every name on your list. If you'll give it to him, he'll take all of it." I gave my life to Christ that afternoon in a coffee shop parking lot. Bill prayed over me for 45 minutes. And when I opened my eyes, something was different. The weight was gone. Not the memories, those stay, but the chains, the darkness, the pull gone. It's been 14 years since that day, and I've spent every one of those 14 years doing two things. First, going through my own deliverance, and the 14-day deliverance protocol was part of that process. Learning to recognize and break every assignment I had placed, starting with the ones on my own heart. Second, making sure every believer I can reach knows what I know. Now if you're listening to this, and something in your spirit is telling you it's time for a change, if you've been struggling in your marriage, and you're realizing for the first time that what you're dealing with might not just be natural, I want you to participate one more time. In the comments, write out this declaration. My marriage is a covenant that no assignment can destroy. Write it out. Put it in the atmosphere. When you declare it publicly, you're drawing a line in the sand. Take 10 seconds. Do it now. So let me bring this all together. The weapon the enemy uses against Christian marriages is offense, unresolved offense, and it operates in 4 stages. Stage 1, the seed. Small offenses are amplified and stored. Stage 2, the root. Memories of offenses are corrupted and become part of your identity. Stage 3, the wall. An invisible barrier goes up that blocks genuine emotional connection. Stage 4, the replacement. Something fills the void that the marriage used to fill: work, ministry, children, entertainment. And the countermeasures are this. For the seed, immediate honesty. Address offense the moment you feel it. Don't let it sit. For the root, deliberate remembrance. Talk about old wounds with your spouse and let truth replace corrupted memory. For the wall, intentional vulnerability. Someone has to go first. Be brave enough to say, "I miss you." For the replacement, courageous return. Put down whatever's numbing you and show up for your marriage. And the ultimate weapon, the thing that makes a marriage untouchable, is agreement. True spiritual agreement between husband and wife. When you agree together, no assignment can stand. Pray together. Speak life over each other. Fight the enemy together instead of fighting each other. I want to say one more thing before I close. If your marriage is in trouble right now, if you're listening to this and you can identify exactly which stage you're in, don't lose hope. I've seen marriages that were dead come back to life. I've seen couples who hadn't spoken in years learn to communicate again. I've seen walls that stood for a decade come crumbling down in a single season of honest conversation. The fact that you're watching this tells me something. So it tells me you care. It tells me you haven't given up. And that's more powerful than you realize, because the enemy's greatest weapon against your marriage is apathy. Getting you to stop caring, stop trying, stop fighting. And if you're here, you haven't stopped. That means the enemy is already losing. Look, I spent 18 years on the wrong side. I know how this stuff works because I did it. I was one of the best marriage destroyers in my region, and I'm not proud of that. I carry the weight of 300 broken families every single day. But God, He pulled me out. He washed me clean. And now I spend my time making sure every married couple who will listen knows exactly what the enemy is doing and exactly how to stop it. If you want the complete protocol for identifying and destroying every type of assignment, not just marriage attacks, but financial attacks, health attacks, destiny attacks, grab Destroying Assignments, links in the description. It'll walk you through everything day by day. My name's Mitch. I grew up in a small farming town. I spent 18 years doing things I can never take back. 300 marriages, over 450 Christians targeted, 91% success rate. But God, He pulled me out, He washed me clean, and now I spend my days on the other side of the line, fighting for the families I used to destroy. Let me pray for you. Father, I lift up every married couple watching right now, every husband and wife who has felt the distance, every marriage where the wall has gone up, Every home where the offense has been sitting and rotting and poisoning what you designed to be beautiful. I come against every marriage assignment in the name of Jesus. I break the seed. I pull out the root. I tear down the wall. I remove every replacement. I declare that these marriages are covered by the blood of Jesus Christ, that no weapon formed against these covenants will prosper, that you are restoring right now what the enemy has stolen. Give them the courage to be honest. Give them the strength to be vulnerable. Give them the grace to forgive, and bring them into agreement, true, unshakable, covenant agreement that makes their marriage untouchable. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. From the pit to the cross, see you in the next one.